it became crystal clear that having a good job was not going to be sufficient because at any moment that good job could disappear. And whether it be from outside sources or I'm no longer someone's guy. I mean, there are corporate politics and things like that that are involved, or you get to a point where your salary starts to get into the upper level where you become expendable and maybe they can hire a junior person to do your job for much less. And those things started to really settle in. I mean, as I watched the people who were let go at that time, it made me really just step back and reflect and say, hey, I never want to feel powerless like some of these people are feeling right now. I never want to feel like I'm defined by a job that I hold.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to Weiss Advice. We're just jumping right into it today with my man, John Casmon. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for having me on the show. Weiss Advice, long time in the making. I know you've had this in the works for a minute, so I'm really excited to be one of your guests.
It is truly my pleasure. And I was a guest on your show, the Target Market Insights. And one of the things I love about John's show, Target Market Insights, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out wherever you listen to podcasts, is that what you did there was different. Okay. And I love podcasts that are different, like this one. I try to make it a little different because it's not just your typical run of the mill. I loved it because when I was looking into different markets, and one of the things you did is that you would speak to a different investor, a different operator or broker, someone that was deeply rooted in one particular city, one market, and you would ask them tons of questions about that market. So it's a great resource for basically every major real estate market around the country, where you can go and listen to John's podcast where he's interviewing someone and they're like, hey, I want to learn about Louisville. What does someone have to say about Louisville? What does someone have to say about, Raleigh, North Carolina? And you can go and learn more about that market. And it's very relevant. So I appreciate you doing that and having that on. You've shown a tremendous amount of, knowledge in different markets and market research, not only in your own investing, but in sharing that wealth. I heard you, I remember on, Dan Hamford's Multifamily Investor Nation giving a webinar about how to find the right market. So without further ado, a little bit about John, just a brief bio, because I just can talk about him all day long. But one thing is that, he's a multifamily investor and syndicator, help busy professionals invest in almost $90 million in real estate. Like I said, he's the host of Target Market Insights. It's both a multi-family and a marketing podcast. So you want to check that out. And one of the things that I loved is that when I was a guest on there, and eventually John is actually going to open his mouth on this show. Don't worry. I'm not going to talk it's not a solo episode, but you interviewed me. I'll just keep going. You interviewed me about LinkedIn. And I think you were the first person that actually interviewed me about how I use LinkedIn. And it kind of opened up this whole new way of sharing that message to a lot of people, how to use LinkedIn the right way.
So what you're really saying is that Weiss Advice probably wouldn't even exist if I didn't bring you on Target Market Insights. That's what I heard you say. Is that accurate?
We can, without the legal disclaimers, but we'll get you some royalties somewhere or another,
Hey, well, listen, thank you for that warm introduction. As you were going on, I didn't want to interrupt. If someone's singing your praises, you don't want to interrupt them and stop them. So I was going to keep letting you go as long as you wanted to, but thank you for all the kind words. With our show, Target Market Insights, it did start really focused on how to find the best places to invest. And as you said, I shared that with other people because it was really the journey I was on. I started my investing in Chicago, and my very first property, basically every economic indicator you could look for pointed me to one specific neighborhood. So that was fairly easy. But as I went to buy my next property, it became a little bit harder, so I tried to figure out, well, what should I be paying attention to? How important is rent growth and what drives rent growth and population growth and all these different things. And then as I looked to expand beyond Chicago, it became even more difficult. So part of it was really me and my journey to invest in other markets, and learning what some of the larger operators are doing, but also learning how you could learn about any market, no matter where you are, no matter where you live. And that was really where these shows started. Since then, we've kind of evolved to do more marketing and multifamily together. So that really is just a market research component. But when you think about branding and, finding deals, finding investors and building your brand and all those different components, really want to tackle some of that. And that really is my background. My background is in marketing, working for large organizations, worked at General Motors in corporate America for a while, and then ultimately in the advertising agency space. So for me, having multifamily and marketing come together was just a natural fit.
Yeah, and it is a really, especially if you're a syndicator and you are trying to raise money for deals, marketing is a huge component of it. Obviously, doing it legally, because there are definitely ways that people get in trouble with marketing deals when there's securities issues involved, but it is a huge component of running deals, having that marketing component. So you add a lot of value there by sharing that knowledge. Another thing about John is he hosts a conference basically in Chicago every year called the the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. And I was, fortunate enough to be there last year in June, and I was supposed to be about a month ago as well, until this whole COVID, pandemic hit and the whole world was shut down and there's no conferences and there's no traveling, and it's really turned everything upside down. And I can't imagine what you've been going through with you and your partner putting on this event for so many years and so many people coming out. And now you've transitioned with that. So tell us a little about that experience and the pivot into what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, just, the event itself is truly a networking event, right? I mean, there's different conferences, lots of real estate events out there, but what my partner and I realized was most of them were really sales pitches in disguise. They were meetings to get people together, and then in the back of the room, they're going to try to sell you some $30,000 program. And we kind of wanted to go to events where you could truly learn, and not just learn the information, but connect with the people that can influence your business, influence your investing. Yeah. That was really important for us. So we created this thing a few years back, the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, all about bringing people together to allow you to build the network you need to accelerate your business. For me personally, my first big multifamily deal really was a result of attending a networking event, a big conference where I met partners I ended up working with after that. So I just knew the power of really connecting through these kind of events. COVID has thrown a monkey wrench in most people's plans, so I'm certainly not going to ask you to shed a tear for me. But as we looked at it, for us, it was more, how do we continue to serve people? It would have been easy to just cancel the event and say, oh, well, we're not going to have it this year. But with people using Zoom, like we're doing right now to record this, I think a lot of people have gotten more familiar with the technology side. There are more and more virtual events that are taking place. And we decided to make the event all virtual for 2020. So we hope to go back to kind of a physical in-person event next year. But for this year, we're trying to make sure it's virtual. And I think the key for us, and one thing that will continue to be a differentiator, is focusing on networking. So even though it's virtual, we're not asking you to come hear 30 speakers doing speaker videos. We still want you to connect and engage with the other participants. So we're going to be creating, these chat rooms and hangouts and things like that really force you, or at least enable you, to connect with other attendees. Because the ultimate goal is not for you to listen to me speak or, other specialists. It's really for you to connect with other investors that may be willing to partner or may be willing to give you the kind of guidance that you need to grow your investing.
And I think people are much more willing nowadays, because of the situation that we're in, to go to such an event virtually and say, hey, I can't meet people in person at an event, and obviously that's ideal. But if I can get in a Zoom room with a few people that we can kind of bounce ideas off each other and get to know each other, or perhaps people that I may have connected with before, but an opportunity to reconnect and an opportunity to kind of build that and see what we're working on now. It's great that you're enabling people to do that. I've found tremendous value in doing that. We now started just a few weeks ago, a weekly virtual meetup So, a lot of people like to go to real estate meetups once a week or once a month, and they'll go and they hang out the same people, right, in the room. Basically, you have, 50, 60% of the same people every week, right? You host a meetup also, right?
Yep.
So you know about that. But now you have the opportunity to bring speakers from anywhere because, beforehand you may have been limited to who can you get, who's going to be in your town or who's going to be traveling and can reach out. Now you can get a speaker from anywhere about any subject. And it's still, what I've found is really we have about 50 to 60% of the same exact people coming every single week. And we have these breakout rooms at the end, which is incredible. It really gives the opportunity where you're really talking like, someone's like, okay, I want to speak to him this week, like set me up in a room with so-and-so. And it's a great opportunity, especially with the cards we've been dealt, to try to maximize that. Are you using any special technology in doing this, in setting it up?
Nothing too special. We've talked to a lot of people. Our mutual friend Dan Hanford just kind of had his MFIN summit over the recently, and I did speak to Dan. I mean, he's got that experience. He's been doing his virtual summit for the last couple of years, so you can call him a visionary, I guess, to start really being the first major player in the multifamily space doing these kind of virtual events. So I did talk to him, and ultimately, I think the back end platform is still going to be Zoom based. The front end maybe looks a little bit different as far as what the attendees see. But, we've used the Wova app for years, and they've actually adjusted and adapted given everything going on. Most of their events are now being virtual as well. So they've added some virtual technology components to it. So we're going to lean in heavy with what Wova has and use that as kind of the main platform. And we're working through some logistics right now and just trying to make sure we can replicate the experience that attendees have come to expect when they attend the event.
That's awesome. And I hope it's going to be a good one. So we're definitely, this is going to air well in time for that event. So we'll put a link in the show notes where anyone can check out the Midwest. And you don't have to be in the Midwest to attend. That's the greatest part.
It's the best thing about it being virtual now.
Yeah, I flew in last year to Chicago and was planning to again this year, but hey, I can access from anywhere. So that is going to be great.
Excellent. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And what else are you seeing in terms of, actually, let me change subjects because I just want to go back. Something really curious to me, because you started out in the advertising space, right? Agencies. And it's fascinating to me how so many people can come to real estate from many different avenues, yet at the same time bringing with them kind of that nuance that they had beforehand into how they invest. I mean, I guess you touched on it a little bit beforehand about how you use that marketing and that background to find markets, et cetera. But is there anything else that you've kind of brought with you and made your investing experience different because of your background?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, you have to understand kind of my why and my story, and it may be similar, obviously some differences, but there may be components of it that are familiar to your listeners. So, I mean, I was a W-2 employee working at a large company, General Motors, working at this large firm, and I was right, down my path of going down corporate America and trying to climb up that corporate ladder. And 2008 hit, and I was at the company in the city that many saw at the forefront of that economic downfall. So for me, it became crystal clear that having a good job was not going to be sufficient, because at any moment that good job could disappear. And whether it be from outside sources or I'm no longer someone's guy. I mean, there are corporate politics and things like that are involved, or you get to a point where your salary starts to get into the upper level where you become expendable, and maybe they can hire a junior person to do your job for much less. And those things started to really settle in. I mean, as I watched the people who were let go at that time, it made me really just step back and reflect and say, hey, I never want to feel powerless like some of these people are feeling right now. I never want to feel like I'm defined by a job that I hold and I'm a marketer, or, and I feel like a lot of people, they define themselves by that job. You go to a cocktail party, people ask, well, tell me about yourself. What do you do? Right. What do you do? And if that's the first question they ask, right? So in some ways, it's really the most powerful telling statement of who you are in their eyes. That's the way they're going to judge you. If I come in and I say I'm a garbage man, regardless of how I feel about it, the outside world's going to react differently. If I say I'm unemployed, you know, or I used to work, the outside world's going to judge. Right now, it's up to us to figure out how we handle that, the way we perceive it, and the way our minds is structured around those things. But it can be stressful. And I saw that for a lot of people. And I think for a lot of listeners, they understand that, you know, part of the reason you get into real estate is for financial freedom. It's to take more control of your life. It's to have flexibility. And as we fast forward to present day, we're seeing the same thing happen with COVID, where people who are maybe now furloughed and they're stressing, not so much about money. I mean, money is certainly a big aspect of what we do. I mean, ultimately, that's why you exchange your hours for dollars. But it's also in the way we define ourselves. And that's a really important thing, is not to allow a job to define who you are, and to figure out how do you get the money that you need? How do you get the income that you need to take care of your bills, to live the lifestyle that you want to live, without necessarily defining yourself by a title or being subject to someone else's decision making. I didn't even answer your question, man. So I'm sorry.
Well, you did, because no, I think you did, because you touched on, you know, what that why was, how you got started, and really that takes a lot of courage. A lot of people don't have that, and so I think that really defines, at least to me. I mean, you can go ahead and answer my question specifically.
To your point, yeah. I mean, I think it starts with the plan, right? So you kind of have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. So I knew at that moment what I was trying to accomplish was getting some passive income, where if I lost my job, if I decided to quit, whatever, I wasn't scrambling or concerned with how I was going to make ends meet. So that was really the initial goal. So I started building my own personal portfolio in about a 2-unit building, about a 3-unit building, about an 8-unit building. And the challenge I faced was I was using all of my money and I was still managing all these assets. So I got to 13 units, 3 separate buildings, and that started to take more work. And I had a pretty demanding day job, and I started having children. And I realized that I wasn't building something in a way where I could scale. And that's where I started opening up myself to partnering with other people and getting into larger apartment deals. But going back to the question you asked, which is about the skill set and kind of how I brought some of the marketing over to this.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you know, from a syndication standpoint, if you're talking about raising capital for deals or attracting capital for deals, well, a lot of that is marketing, right? I mean, your network today is your network today. There's not a whole lot you can do about people you met through school and past experiences. Now, you can certainly reach out to them and engage with those individuals and things like that. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is find the people who are like-minded, who share kind of a similar passion, similar story that you can connect with. And you can call it marketing, you can call it sales, whatever you want to call it. But for me, it was, how do I identify those people? How do I get on podcasts like this and start to attract those individuals into my sphere? How do I create value and add value for those individuals? So that's kind of where, when I realized what I was really dealing with was a marketing challenge. Because at the end of the day, from any entrepreneur, if you're talking about customers or clients that you serve, if you don't have enough of them, you have a marketing issue. So you need to figure out ways to get in front of more people. And whether that's using social media, whether that is creating content that you can push out to others, ultimately it's still a marketing problem that you're trying to solve. So tapping into that experience, not to mention, I used to oversee 7 teams. So from a project management perspective, understanding, you know, who needs to be where, doing what, overseeing, you know, large budgets for marketing campaigns and things like that. Those skills are transferable when it comes to overseeing budgets, overseeing teams, managing timelines, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's an extremely valuable point. And to anyone who's listening to this and you're in any sort of job, whatever you're doing, you have to realize that, you know, going to real estate, yes, there is so many new skills that you need. But at the same time, there are so many skills that are transferable from any other business, because real estate is a business just like anything else. And when you understand that, you open up to so many more opportunities that you didn't even know existed, because you think, oh, it's a whole new industry, it's a whole new thing, I never can do it. And once you open yourself up to that, you know, the opportunities will come. So John, I appreciate that. I want to jump right into the final 4. We'll get it moving on to the first question for you is, what was the worst job that you ever had?
Worst job, man. I've had some bad jobs. The worst job I ever had, Well, there's two. The first one was, and this is more of a project job, I guess, but I was asked to clean a warehouse. So I cleaned this warehouse. I had a little, I had a push room, but it was a small push room, maybe about 24 inches or whatever. And giant warehouse. I was maybe 10, 12 years old, and it took me 2 hours to clean up this entire warehouse. And the owner of the warehouse, he came over and said, "Great job. You know, how much do you think you should be paid?" I'm like, "Man, that was a big warehouse. Took me 2 hours. You know, I'm like, probably $15." And he's like, "$15? Whoa." And I'm like, $10? $10? Whoa. And this guy walked me down. He let me negotiate against myself, right? And he walked me down to $5. And I just remember like, dude, for all that, for $5, you're out of your mind. I would never do this again. So that was it. So because he wanted me to keep coming back every Saturday, I'm like, absolutely not doing this again. So that was bad. But I also learned that immediately and walked away. You know, outside of that, the only other bad job I had was my first job out of college, you know, first job in advertising out of school. I was super excited. I had a great internship. I was, you know, pegged to be like this young marketing star. At least I thought this in my head. And I go to this place and they were a regional advertising agency. And I didn't really know what that meant. And they were like, you know, we're a regional. I'm like, hey, whatever. So I get there and the client we had was Arby's. And at that time they had the oven mitt the oven mitt or whatever. So I was super excited to work on this campaign. And what I realized, that was not the job. I ended up calling Anchorage, Alaska to ask McDonald's if they had any specials. And just was not the kind of work I was expecting to do. Sorry, my grass guy's here. He didn't tell me it's coming. So excuse the background noise. But it was not the job that I expected to have by any means. So that job, I lasted 8 weeks. It was easily the worst real job I've ever had. And I think it was just more of a miscommunication of expectations.
All right. So the next question I have, because that sounded like it was a job, that no one would really want, because your expectations are totally, not aligned.
I thought I was going to be working on advertising campaigns. I mean, that's what I had worked on a new business pitch as an intern, where I had to come in on the day after I graduated from college. Literally, I walked the stage. The next day, I had to drive back to Detroit because we had a new business pitch. So we had a prep with the president of the company at 9 a.m. And so I didn't party after graduation. I went to Detroit, went to my 9 a.m. Monday, we presented to the client. I was a part of the team that I got to greet them. And I go to this job. So my expectations were super high. I was an intern. So I go to this first real job and they have me cold calling franchise owners in Anchorage, Alaska, and all over the country. And I'm just literally, and it's market research, but who calls McDonald's and asks them about if they have any specials? Could you the other side of the phone was like, what?
It sounds like misused, energy.
Yeah.
Okay. The second question, John, is what was a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
The one that is more recent that really had a big impact on me was Atomic Habits. I talk about it frequently. Atomic Habits by James Clear. Mm-hmm. And I just really love the simplicity of the book. A lot of times we talk about our goals and goal setting, and we have these big, hairy, audacious goals and visions that we want to accomplish, and we got to become this person who can actually do these things. Well, this takes the opposite approach. This is really simplistic. It talks about the things you can do right now that can spark and kind of create a stack of habits that you can create to become the person that you want to be. To give you one clear example, if you decide you want to lose 15 pounds and you want to run more frequently, or you want to run, 3 times a week, the goal is not to run 3 times a week. The goal is to put on your running shoes, right? So it's what's that trigger, that initial goal that gets you going. So, and he's like, listen, put on your running shoes, make that the goal each day. Even if you don't run, if you decide to take them off, that's fine. You've accomplished the goal. Because if your goal is just to put on, if the habit is put on the running shoes, then the next logical habits can be stacked on top of that, right? So you just have to get that first habit going to build. And I just thought it was very practical, very simple, that anyone can do it. It's not something that you need to go and think about much further. It's just you can implement it immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Third question is, what skill or talent would you like to learn?
How to talk over your grass cutting. That would be That would be really
You're
good.
doing pretty well. I don't know. Maybe you could teach a course on it. You're doing pretty well.
Yeah. Kind of like flag them, like, go then, get in the front. No, I've always been interested in learning a language. I studied French for 10 years. Je ne parle français pas. So still working on that. Didn't really help very much because the way we studied French was, I learned words, really didn't learn the language.
Yeah.
I've been learning Hindi for a couple of years as well. So I think, learning a language, being able to pick up on a language would be something I would be interested in.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, immersion is really the only way to truly learn a language.
Yeah,
just start talking it. Because book learning, is one thing. If you're going to be researching and you're going to be writing, is one thing to study a language. But if you really want to learn a language to speak it, the way to do it is just to speak it. And you pick up a lot just along the way.
You're right. I could read French and I could write French for a long time. I don't know about now, but I could write and read when I was in high school and college. I'm not, but speaking it was always more difficult.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day you'll go to, I want to say France, but Montreal or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not as exotic, but more practical. The final question I have for you, John, is what does success mean to you?
Success really comes down to freedom of choice. It's the ability to make decisions based on what motivates you in the moment, to have that flexibility. And that really is it. You can't put a dollar amount on it. You can't really put, other things on there other than your lifestyle and what you want. So if you like staying at home, if you can create a lifestyle that allows you to do that, great. If you want to travel the world to create a lifestyle that affords you the luxury to do that, I think that's great. But if you take that and add some happiness alongside of it, I think that's really what success is really all about. It's just having the flexibility to be happy and to live a lifestyle that makes you happy.
Sounds like a recipe for success. To do that, that's beautiful. And where can our listeners reach you? We're going to put a link to the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit, so people can check that out right away before they run out of tickets. But where else can people find you?
Yeah, if you're interested in hearing more about the podcast we mentioned earlier, Target Market Insights, Multifamily Marketing, you can check that out anywhere you listen to podcasts. Wherever you're listening to this show, outside of his website, because if you're on the website, obviously my show is not on the website. But we do have our own website, so you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you want to go there. And other than that, we do have a sample deal. If anyone's interested in seeing what a multifamily deal package looks like, whether you are interested in being a passive investor or being an active investor and just doing your own deals, you can check out our sample deal at casmoncapital.com/sample deal.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you spending here. Let's give a thanks to the landscaper also for joining us. And
absolutely.
We got to do this again sometime soon. And to our listeners, I appreciate you taking the time out, and I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn. Send me a DM, a connection request, Yona Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.